Hey, what's happening? What's popping, everybody? Right now, what's going on is the Sableye suspect, and Oris is slowly coming to a close. But this particular Mega, in my opinion, was the worst Pokemon in Oris, and it totally ruined Oris. Not only for, OU, but I think it was the worst Oris Pokemon that we have. So I'm gonna kind of go in depths of the reason why. So some of the sets that you see is the fake out or protect lead to get the instant mega off, and you see things like knockoff, foul play, will-o-wisp, toxic for Talonflames and stuff like that, and then recover. The thing with Mega Sableye is that it can beat things by itself. For example, what it does by itself is it never dies. It only has one weakness, and its bulk is insane. Because you're always going to invest in max HP, which it has kind of a crappy low HP stat, but that's fine. And it has a low speed stat, but like every other stat, base 125 defense and base 115 speed F, this thing takes hits, always, and has instant recovery, and it has things to work around physical and special mons. So there's only a few Pokemon that really can handle this thing 1v1. For example, Heat Ran, Lava Plumes, and crits, but it technically can beat Heat Ran if it gets lucky enough with the Lava Plumes and stuff like that. But most Sableye teams have things for Heat Ran. Another thing that you're going to see are things like Mega Lopunny, things like just massive wall breakers that can hit Mega Sableye. Things like Azumarill can break it. Keldeo Scalds, Spec Scalds can break it. So the thing is that there definitely are Mons in OU, Mega Gardevoir, so fairy types obviously, but also just extremely hard hitters that are not really physical type attackers because it does have Foul Play and Will-O-Wisp. So Zard X can't really set up on this thing. And it has to be like specific tech physical attackers can really beat Sableye. So Substitute or Lumberry, Swords Dance Terrakion, for example, or if you're lucky enough, flinching it down with Jirachi. So basically, it can beat it can be a lot of physical type attackers because Mega Lopunny is not switching into Will-O-Wisps, Azumarill's not switching into Will-O-Wisps, and it just can handle a lot of physical type attackers too that try to set up on it, like Talonflame or Charizard X, that it can just easily foul play. And you can't really status it other than secondary effects. So that's just a game of luck. And we all know Sableye users are like some of the luckiest players because they're stall guys. So the other set that you see in OU is this the Snarl is either Snarl, Shadow Ball, or it's one coverage, Dark Pulse, depending on team archetype here. But this Sableye actually beats other Sableye, and if it's Rocks Clef without Calm Mind, it eventually, a well-played Sableye actually can set up, and if it has like a little bit more Spadef, eventually it can wear down and potentially beat Clefables. This set isn't necessarily the best set, but if you're not prepared for this Mega Sableye set, it's gonna be an absolute menace. And the things that, in my opinion, really make Mega Sableye really cancerous is that you can make it on very good, well-rounded stall teams. So Mega Sableye, now partnered with the rest of its teammates, it provides as a hazard blocker, a anti-setup if it's not substitute, and you have Quagsire and possibly Unaware Clef, depending on what the team actually is and what it's weak to. But Mega Sableye helps these teammates a lot because, one, you always have to make predictions around Sableye. You can't willingnessly just set up rocks or spikes because you're always worrying about the Sableye switch in. So for example, Rocky Helmet Landorus sets on every single team, or the Rocky Helmet Garchomp can't really. I mean, definitely cannot 2 a KO Sableye. Potentially can 3 a KO it, but it also risks getting burned, and you have to always, yeah, basically you have to predict around the Sableye here often. And if they're a bad stall player, you're never gonna predict around that, and it's gonna be an absolute nightmare. Um, this thing, and also it beats things that it really shouldn't beat, like people switching like Spadef, Mega Sableye on things like Tornadus, and they just dodge all the hurricanes. So basically, like, if you're gonna beat Mega Sableye by itself, you have to get lucky. In a lot of cases, unless, because the thing is like, oh well, I can just prepare for these kind of archetype teams with maybe like a Lumberry Tarak or things like that. But like, there, because of the current meta, there are only certain mons that you could actually run in OU, because the bulky ground types like Garchomps and the Landorses, it limits your team building, because you can't, just dedicate your team to totally counter teams like this, because if you have a team that does very well versus like Cancer Stall teams, you're going to be so weak to the actual meta versus the majority of the tier. So most players that are going to face the Mega Sableye team, the Cancer Stall team, are going to have, maybe one or two things that can somewhat deal with it. And because of Clefable, I mean, this team is relative, these front 5 out of the 6 is weak to something like a Mega Heracross, but they add Clefable in, and especially if it's unaware, like, the team just like nothing dies. And so this is why Mega Sableye needs to be banned, and why I'm already voicing my opinion first is because I do have an audience, and I really appreciate my audience, but it's not like the Pokegame audience where it's just by 100,000, right? So he doesn't want to voice his opinion because he's gonna have this huge influence. Where as I like, I don't really feel as guilty just kind of voicing my opinions early on in this, because I don't really have that big of an audience, and I really want people and the viewers to understand why this thing is just such a problem. By itself, it's threatening, but it can be worked around. It can be outplayed. But if you have the bulk, right? So now we're gonna get into the teammates, right? Between Amoonguss, sometimes you see another, like, 2 Keldeo checks, because the Sableye Chansey core, or I mean, sometimes you see like Spadef Talon, like the blunder type team that's not full on Cancer. That team isn't like too hard to crack, but when you got like 6 fat Pokemon that just like never died, like the stupidest fucking team on the ladder. Well, one of them. There are actually stupider teams in this, but Chansey can actually beat physical type attackers, especially if Sableye burns a physical type attacker. This thing can take hits from like things like Exedra or defensive Landorses and guard jumps and stuff like that. Chansey by itself is just so disgustingly bulky, because of its HP stat, and you can't. So with these two things, now you can't really set up capitalize, because now you have things like Amoonguss with Clear Smog, you have unaware Quagsire, potentially unaware Clefable, Whirlwind, Skarmory, and you wouldn't have this problem with, stall teams would not be so menacing in OU if Mega Sableye was gone, because every single full-on stall team needs Mega Sableye because it does so much. It is so broken, and it's not. See, the thing is, for people who say that Mega Sableye is just annoying, it's beyond annoying, because you need to overcompensate for these kinds of teams, or you will lose to them every single time, because this team of 6 can pretty much handle everything in the OU tier if outplayed, played correctly, not crucial misplays, and correct EVs and things like that, you have to go out of your way to have specific checks on your team of six to handle a team like this. So now we're going to dive into the this team was currently OU, or it was currently number one not too long ago. There are different versions of this team, and this team has been edited here and there by the original creator. But the thing with Mega Sableye now is that you have Shedinja. Shedinja serves so many purposes where it can beat non flamethrower Clefable. It can beat things like the Keldeos. Because most mons in OU, the Garchomps without Toxic or Fire Blast, if you lack coverage for Shedinja, like when I face like this type of team, for me, I only have about maybe two Mons that can actually touch Shedinja. And so I have to outplay the Sableye, I have to outplay the Doug Trio, because another thing is this team is a little bit weak to something like a Heatran, but actually it's not, because you have to, if you get a kill with Heatran, then it gets revenged, and now you can never kill the Shedinja or the Sableye or anything like that, So another thing, with this team is that you got Talonflame Spidef Talonflame with Sableye. It's very, very good synergy right there. You got the Defogger, you got Seismitoad with Rest, and then you got Heal Bell Togekiss. So if Sableye does get status, see, the thing is, once again, you have to get lucky to get a status on Sableye, and then it gets Heal Belled off. So I don't know, man. I really am very, very strong and adamant about getting this mega banned. I will be doing suspects, so I will be laddering on the OU tier to get this thing banned. These are my thoughts. If you guys have anything that you want to question or don't agree with, let me know. And if we can have a reasonable discussion, I'd like to do that. But so these are some of my thoughts, and I'll stay tuned until next time. I hope you guys enjoyed, and signing out. Peace.